everyone, and welcome to Sensory Friendly Saturdays. My name is Emma, and I'm a host at the Ontario Science Centre. And today I have a lovely group of guests joining me. I have Shelley, who is a representative from our partner, the Geneva Centre for Autism. And I also have a group of guests who are working on a project called Neuronics. And that's a project that's exploring the benefits of crafting. Now, before we get any further, I would like to acknowledge that while we are all joining from different locations, we are all meeting here today on Turtle Island, which has been cared for and inhabited by Indigenous people since time immemorial. I personally am in Toronto right now, which is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee people, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. I would also like to give a special welcome to anyone who is joining Sensory Friendly Saturday for the first time, or to anyone who may be unfamiliar with the Zoom format. Sensory Friendly Saturdays are events that we run on the first Saturday of every month, and we discuss a wide range of topics, including current research like this, as well as specific tips and strategies for everyday life, like creating routines, building independence, and accessing community supports. If there's anything specific that you'd like to see, be sure to let us know. All of our past Zoom sessions have been recorded and are available on the Ontario Science Centre website. That also means that this session is being recorded, so feel free if you have to step away for a second or if you miss something, don't worry, you'll be able to rewatch this. We also have the Q&A function available, but the chat has been disabled. That's because we'd like to hear your questions and comments through the Q&A function because it gives you the ability to ask anonymously if you'd like, and it also helps keep the conversation in one place so no one's questions get lost. We will be using the chat to provide links to various resources, and I'll be monitoring the Q&A function during the discussion, so don't worry, we'll get all the questions answered. Now I want to give everybody a chance to introduce themselves so we can hear a little bit more about our guests. Shelley, would you like to start?
Thanks, Emma, so much for the introduction, and welcome everybody this morning to Sensory Friendly Saturdays. And as Emma said, it's a partnership between the Ontario Science Centre and the Geneva Centre for Autism. And for those of you that may not know, the Geneva Centre is an agency here in Toronto that provides a wide variety of services and programming for children, youth, and adults with autism. And also provides support and training for their supporters, their caregivers. And I've been part of this project here with the Science Centre, Sensory Friendly Saturdays, since the beginning in 2018. And it's been definitely one of my favorite things to do each month on the first Saturday. So I'm glad that despite COVID and everything that we're going through, that we're still able to bring this programming to you virtually. I just also want to take a brief moment. We are in the month of April, and April is Autism Awareness or Autism Acceptance Month. And it is the mission of Geneva Centre to empower all individuals with autism and those that support them to fully participate in their communities. So this month is near and dear to our hearts. If you're interested, I think Rachel will put in the chat or in the resources the link to our website. If you're interested to learn more about what we do and what we provide. And if you go to our website as well, you'll see across the month of April, we're doing a campaign striving to ensure that no one is left behind. So there's more information on our website about that as well. And I will now hand it over to Melanie, who will introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Happy Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month. My name is Melanie Penner, and I am a developmental pediatrician and a clinician scientist at Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital in Toronto. I have a clinical practice that's focused on autism, and I also do autism research. And today we're going to be talking about a research project that I led along with some of our wonderful panelists here. So next I'm going to turn it over to Alicia to introduce herself.
Thanks, Dr. Penner. My name is Alicia Kapoor. I am a medical student at Queen's University, and I had the incredible honor of being a part of the Neuronics team with Dr. Penner in the summer of 2019. I'm going to hand it over to Rachel now.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm a client of Geneva Centre, and I helped with the Neuronics program early on when they were starting to get a perspective from someone with autism who knits.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for introducing yourselves. Now, I know I'd like to hear more about the Neuronics project, more about the research and how the experiment was conducted. Can you guys tell us some more about that?
Sure. Let's bring up our slideshow. Here we go. So we were titling this talk, Let's Get Crafty. So we're not going to talk only about knitting. We're going to try to think about the benefits of making and crafting for everyone, and that includes autistic people, that includes other neurodevelopmental disorders, and it actually includes everyone. So we think there are lots of benefits that we can experience from crafting. So some disclosures about me. So I have received funding for my research from a few different groups. So CIHR and FRF stand for some Canadian federal government funding grants, and also from an organization called Autism Speaks. I have lots of positions of privilege in my life. So I am a white, cisgender, heterosexual, neurotypical woman, and I work as a doctor and a scientist. Related to this, I'm an avid knitter. And one of the co-investigators on this project runs a yarn shop, and she provided us with yarn at a discount. And we've already done our land acknowledgement today, but I am quite thankful for the stewardship of this land that's happened for millennia. The other thing that I'll say is that I will be using identity first language. So that would sound like autistic person, as opposed to person first language, which is person with autism. There are lots of different perspectives on what people prefer. And so everyone's perspectives are welcome here on this. Okay. Alicia.
My name is Alicia Kapoor, again, and I had the privilege of working on this project with Dr. Penner. I have no financial disclosures, but I'd like to say that I am a second generation Indo-Canadian settler, and I was able to complete this project more towards the middle to tail end through the Holland Bloorview Summer Student Research Program. So I kind of came in after all the groups had been run and helped analyze the data and write up the project. I'm also an avid knitter, but I'm fairly recent in terms of my knitting journey. It's been about 1.5 to 2 years. And I am coming to you from the traditional Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee territory.
Okay, so we have a question to start out. So are you a parent, caregiver, an educator, an autistic person, a student, or other? So just help us get a sense of who is in the audience today. Okay, so we have a good mix of people here. So some parents, some educators, some autistic people, which is awesome, some students, and some others. So mysterious others. If you want, you might want to let us know in the Q&A who is here. And then we have another question. Are you a maker? Yes, no, or looking for inspiration. And then we'd also love to hear, if you are a maker, what kind of crafting you enjoy. And I think we'll get to see some great examples of many of these things today. So many makers here. That's great. and people looking for inspiration. So people, and I love to see people are doing a variety of different things. So we have some fellow knitters here, some people who do crochet, which is cool. We're going to talk about the crochet coral reef, I think, today. Lots of people who do paper craft, painting, drawing. So there are lots of ways to engage in making and hopefully to experience some of the benefits of making. So why crafts, and why did we kind of undertake this project? So this started with a very personal inspiration for me. So I started knitting about 6 years ago. I'm wearing a sweater that I knit. And I noticed so many benefits that I experienced from knitting. So it was a way to keep my busy hands occupied with something. I found there was a lot of stress relief that could come from it. And I also found that when I was knitting in a meeting, I was better able to focus on what was going on. It became something that was social for me. So I made friends who were also knitters. And so I started to think a lot more about the therapeutic benefits of doing something like knitting. And being a developmental pediatrician and working with autistic children and youth, I thought to myself, I wonder if anyone has tried this out with this particular population, or kids with other types of neurodevelopmental disorders. So we started looking in the literature to see, and sure enough, there had been a little bit out there. So knitting groups had been tried with people with substance use disorders and people with eating disorders, but there hadn't been anything yet about this population of people with neurodevelopmental disorders. So I was very keen to see what we could do. And then I thought up this name, which was Neuronics, which starts with a silent K, as you'll see. And then I was like, oh boy, now we really have to try this out and see if a kind of knitting and social program would have benefits for autistic youth and youth with other neurodevelopmental disorders. So I'm going to turn it over to Alicia, who's going to tell you a bit more about the specifics of the Neuronics program.
Thanks, Dr. Penner. So as Dr. Penner mentioned, Neuronics is a project of love from many people, and there are some names that are written here. So what I'll do today is I'll kind of take you through the scientific method of what we went through in order to go from an idea to finding results. As with any scientific project, or starting with what Neuronics is a pilot group-based knitting and social skills program for youth with neurodevelopmental disorders and acquired brain injuries. So, as with any scientific project, we needed to come up with a question and what we were looking for. So our question in this case was to look at the social engagement experiences of individuals with neurodevelopmental conditions participating in this program, because there was also social programming that went along with the group, as well as looking at any symptoms of anxiety following this Neuronics intervention. Following a question, you have to look at how it is that you're going to design the study that you're looking at. So the first part was looking at who we were going to invite to participate in this group, which included youth with neurodevelopmental disorders or acquired brain injuries. They participated in a 4-week knitting and social curriculum. And then we looked at our outcomes between week 1 and week 4. When you have a question and you have a study, you have to look at different specific outcomes. And what we were looking at was social engagement and the impact on anxiety symptoms. So when you have specific outcomes, you also need a way to be able to measure them. The way we measured the social engagement and anxiety response was 2 ways. One, we looked at questionnaires to look at the numbers. And the second, we looked at interviews and what people had to say about this programming. So with the questionnaires, With the questionnaires, we had a self-reported experience of activity questionnaire, which was developed at Holland Bloorview Hospital, and some questionnaires on self-reported anxiety symptoms. And then we analyzed the interviews for common themes. Just a bit about who participated in these studies. So between the Ontario Science Centre and Holland Bloorview Hospital, we had about 14 individuals around the ages of 16 to 18 years old on average, a good mix of self-identified males and females. And in terms of the neurodevelopmental conditions represented, we had autistic people, individuals with ADHD, individuals who had experienced a traumatic brain injury, as well as individuals with developmental coordination disorder. So turning it back to you before we start talking about some of our findings, we would like to know, why do you craft? All right. So a good mixture of reasons. A lot of people think that it's fun. It helps people unwind. People like working with their hands. I also like working with my hands. It's really fun to be able to make something and just to learn a new skill. Fantastic. If you have other, we'd love to hear what other reasons you have for crafting in our Q&A. So, second question is, do you enjoy crafting as a social activity? So, some people enjoy it as a solo activity. I will admit I do like my knitting as a solo activity, but also some like a small group of friends or a mixture of the above. It is quite fun to be able to knit with a little group of people with tea or craft or bead or whatever it is that you do. Moving on. So at this point in our whole scientific process, we've had a question. We've asked what it is that we're looking for. We have collected that given data. And now it's time for us to be able to take a look at some of the results. In this case, what we'll do is we'll start with some of the interviews and what people had to say. So in our process, when we were looking at interviews, what we really wanted to do was honor the words that individuals had to say, but also look for some common themes. So what I'll do now is I'll show you some common themes that we came up with, and then read off some quotes from our participants to elaborate and show you what we mean. The three big themes that came out of us analyzing those interviews were one, that a more of a commentary on our social curriculum, which was how people felt about the balance of facilitated interaction versus just going about and mingling on their own. The second was that people really felt a sense of community from the shared experience. And the third had to do more with the actual benefits of knitting. So in terms of a balance of organic and facilitated social interactions, because there was a social curriculum, so every week along with a knitting lesson, there was also a lesson on how you can introduce yourself, how you can talk about your hobbies, etc. People felt that they had some mixed feelings about what the facilitated interaction and organic interaction allowed them to be able to do. So one participant actually said that they liked the activities because they weren't really pushing people or forcing people to socialize, which was really nice. The second theme was that people felt a sense of community from shared experience. And this was quite interesting because we found that this shared experience was one of two things. Either it was the shared experience of learning something new with a group of people and going through the process of being frustrated, then learning, then being able to produce something, or it was the shared experience of youth who had been through similar life experiences all gathering in one room to be able to do one activity. And I think that this is really nicely highlighted from one of our participants who said, "I'm around people who are not defined as normal or not neurotypical. And I've always felt that throughout this whole recovery process, it's so hard to find someone who has had the same or similar experiences as you. So I guess being around people my age that have had a similar experience, it really helped." And I think this individual really highlights what people in crafting communities also feel, is that they're looking for people who are similar to them that they can share this experience with, or even if you're meeting with people who are different from you, that you're sharing in this one experience together. And lastly, what everyone is itching to hear about is the actual benefits of being able to knit. And we found so many that were highlighted through our interviews, some of which included pride in creating a finished product, the ability to be productive, the fact that this craft was able to help individuals relax, and also, interestingly enough, there's this choice to be able to be social in a very community setting. So just to highlight some of these, I'll read you what some of our participants said. One participant said, I really like to learn how to knit because I'd rather knit and it's still doing something other than just sitting around. It's doing something productive. Another participant said, it's hard to put into words really how I felt about learning how to knit. I guess I'd say it felt relaxing. And one other individual said, I like the fact that I could do knitting. And that was the other focus of the program. I could do this and it would give me a break because people would see you knitting and be like, okay, maybe we'll talk later. So a lot of individuals highlighted a lot of these similar themes. And I thought it was interesting to see that some people said, even when they were interacting, it was socially appropriate to not have to make eye contact in this situation as well. And that was a common theme that came up as well. Some other individuals who had experienced traumatic brain injuries really highlighted that knitting was able to provide them with a productive activity by limiting their screen time. So many, many benefits, but these were some that were really highlighted within our group of people. And as you can see here, we have a couple of pictures of things that people created. There's a phone case in the lower right, a really beautiful infinity scarf in the upper right, and a scarf in the making with this really beautiful purple yarn. So moving on from our interviews, we also, if you recall from earlier, looked at interviews and we looked at more questionnaires so we could get more of a holistic view of what it is that was happening. So we created at Holland Bloorview Hospital had a questionnaire called the Self-Reported Experience of Activity Settings questionnaire, which individuals filled out. And it divided their social experience into 5 categories: personal growth, psychological engagement, social engagement, meaningful interaction, and choice and control. And what we found, essentially from this seemingly busy chart, was that individuals were able to rate their experience based on either strongly agreeing with a positive statement or strongly agreeing with a negative statement. And what we can see here is between session 1 and 4, generally, people agreed strongly with the positive statements in each category. And these positive statements, or the ratings of the positive statements, actually improved between both the sessions. With the biggest change coming in the section of meaningful interaction, which was a very pleasant surprise for us to be able to find. All right, so breaking it up. In the time of COVID, when there isn't the ability to be able to interact with people in nice big groups, and we just talked so much about how crafting provides a sense of community, I'd like to know what it is that you're doing to be able to kind of cultivate your community, help find inspiration, and learn new crafts online. Fantastic. I will admit, I also tried to learn how to knit through YouTube, and it's actually quite good. So blogs are popular, social groups and circles, and you can actually maybe do those through Zoom as well. And online platforms such as Ravelry, good inspiration from there for me as well. Okay. So let's move on. At this point, we've collected our data, we've looked at our social engagement piece, which was one of our objectives. So now let's chat about the impact on symptoms of anxiety that we found. So there were 2 different questionnaires that we used. One looking at symptoms of anxiety more in the moment, and that's what we're looking at here. This is called the State Trait Anxiety Inventory, but essentially what we're looking at is there were a bunch of questions that looked at self-reported symptoms of anxiety, and between The start of session 1 and the end of session 1 and the start of session 4 and the end of session 4, we really saw a decrease in the self-reported symptoms of anxiety. Looking more in the long term, so this questionnaire looked at symptoms of anxiety over a period of 7 days. We found something very similar. So we saw that between session 1 and 4, the longer term self-reported symptoms of anxiety also decreased. Now, what does all of this mean? With a scientific study, we had our question, we looked at our outcomes, we gathered results, we looked at our results, but all of it needs to come together with our interpretations and figuring out what exactly all of this means and how it applies to us. So in our context, even though we had a small group of people, what we found was that with social engagement experiences really, that having the circle of crafting really did help with those social engagement experiences. People found a new craft, they learned a new craft together, and they found a shared sense of community. In terms of the ability to help cope with some symptoms of anxiety, our numbers and our analysis of our numbers also showed that there was a decrease in those self-reported symptoms. From our interviews, we also got some really good feedback on the curriculum and the programming that we could implement. And in terms of future directions, Holland Bloorview Hospital was able to implement an outpatient knitting program before COVID in order to help the patients and clients that were there. What this means for you is that looking at this data, picking up a craft can really help with provide certain coping mechanisms. It can help you learn something new. It can give you something productive to do. There are so many benefits and so many different implications for everyone really learning this new skill. And I think we only really scratched the surface of it. So at this point, I'd like to thank you for listening. I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Penner to close off.
So in conclusion, we think you need a hobby. I think I hope we've helped to emphasize that there really could be some benefits to having a hobby. So we are sharing some of our hobby work and what it has meant to us. So that's a picture of me and my family. We're all wearing sweaters that I made. There's Alicia in her wonderful final product of her knitting. And then I also thought I would share. So this picture is related to my husband. So he was at the beginning of the pandemic quite stir crazy. And this is what I said to him: you need a hobby. And he was not interested in knitting, but what he did take up was cross stitch. I have one of his creations here and a couple hanging up in my office, and he has taken it up so extensively that we now have 3 shelves in our basement devoted to his cross stitch work. I think we also have a picture here of finger knitting, which is related to corking, and Emma posted a wonderful craft and video about how you can get started in trying out corking, which is a really nice entry point if you wanted to kind of get the feel for what knitting is like. There are just so many possible things you can do as a maker, and so don't be limited by what we suggest here. Go out and find the thing that is right for you. So in conclusion, we will say, keep calm and cast on. So casting on is how we start a knitting project. Now I am most excited to shift over to Rachel, who is a person with autism and who advised us on the Neuronics program, and she's going to talk about her experience.
My name's Rachel. I've been doing crafts passionately since I was 14. I started off with crochet, and I knew how to knit at the same time, but I didn't really do as much of it. And I crocheted for a long time, and I started learning just doing beadwork on my own, just making stuff up. And it actually turned out that I was actually doing something called bead weaving, and I didn't even know it. And I find I do knitting and beadwork now, and I've also done pottery and cross stitch and rug hooking and most crafts you could probably think of. And I really enjoy having something to do with my hands. I really enjoy patterns. I'm very when I see a pattern of someone's wearing a shirt that's made and it's got a very interesting pattern on it, then I'm very interested in it. Patterns are like, to me, uh like has how I keep order in my life. Like, I make geometric patterns for my crafts, and they are the the patterns are a way of keeping things exact and precise, and that's what I like in my life, is like exact, precise, intricate things. I'll show you some of my work. This is a hat that I made. I made this pattern myself, and I like this pattern because it's very geometric, which is how I like, what kind of patterns I like. And this is a hat that I designed for Autism Awareness Day. It's got a puzzle piece which represents autism. It says hope on one side, and it says love on the other side. And in terms of my beadwork, I have bracelets here. This is a bracelet with a stitch called peyote stitch, and this is also peyote stitch, and this one too. And I make my own patterns for these. I design them on a special paper, a graph paper that has like blank spots on it, and I color it in. And this is an African netted necklace that I made. I designed this all by myself. And this is one too. I find that knitting and beadwork and crafts in general are very good for me, because I have a hard time socializing sometimes. And so if I'm knitting and I'm in a social situation, it's not as unsocial as if you were on a screen and not paying attention. Like, I can still communicate with people, but I'm not forced to be totally subjected to having to look at people, and having the knitting helps me focus on something other than being forced to socialize. And also, it helps me focus if I'm in a situation, like in meetings, like Melanie said. It does help a lot to focus on things. And yeah, it's very interesting, because when I'm in the subway or I'm watching a movie and I see someone with a knitted sweater or something beaded, that's where my attention gets immediately drawn to, and it's just one of my biggest passions, and among other things. But I really get really excited when I see things, cable patterns. This is a cable headband that I designed, and I actually have a blanket right now that is too big to show you, but it's a very complicated cable pattern with crochet on the sides. So I actually combined two different styles into one thing. And
I was going to say, it sounds like in the chat, we've got a good mix of people who kind of have your experience of they've been crafting for a little while, or they are trying lots of different things. We've got some people who have mentioned beading. We have someone who said that they have their own craft store like you do. But we also have a good amount of people who have not tried crafting before, or who are just starting, who have not tried, or who are maybe a little bit nervous about starting. I know you've been crafting since you were a kid, but does anyone want to talk about what it's like starting crafting? I know, Shelley, you've said you want to answer this question, but I know, Alicia, you also just started knitting.
Yeah, I myself, I crochet and I knit. It's something that my mother taught me and her mother taught her. So it's a nice sort of family thing. And I'm trying to teach my younger daughter as well. But there was a question in the chat or a comment around the scariness of getting started and trying something new and, maybe not getting it right the first time. And, definitely when you look at Rachel, your work is phenomenal. It's just so incredible and so beautiful. Your talent is so great. But to not let that deter you, I almost see that as motivation. I think, the first step is always just sort of trying, whether it's something like corking or finger knitting, the example that you did in the sort of Friday Fun video, Emma, or you want to try into crocheting, knitting, all the different types of makers that are out there. I think, it's just sort of just starting. And it's kind of cool, I think, as you continue, once you've started anything, to look back on your journey to kind of see, this is where I started and this is where my potential has come. And so I think if you're just interested in something, it's not necessarily about making that perfect thing. It's about the doing, as we've heard today, the action of just, it's calming, it's, keeps my hands busy. It's a way to allow me to be social in a different way than perhaps many people expect. It's a way for me to become more inclusive in certain areas without the pressure of talking and things like that. So I think it's just the doing. And once you start doing, that sort of fear or scariness, I can guess, will sort of dissipate over time.
I would like to add to that. We had someone asking about, feeling frustrated when you're first learning. And I can definitely identify that. I learned crafting when I was young, but I had several brain injuries as a teenager. So I remember what it was like I already knew how to do knitting and stuff, but that frustration when you're first learning something. And you see a lot of examples of knitting in life, like what Rachel was saying about seeing things that people are wearing, and they all look so nice and so neat and so tidy. But you don't really see very many examples of bad knitting. So you look at it and you're immediately like, oh, well, this isn't right. This isn't good. So I'm always a big fan of lowering the expectations into what you can do. So don't worry too much about the idea of, doing a complicated knitting project or wanting it to look perfect. Like, that's why I have my corker here that I used for the video. Even things like knitting supplies, you have to you can't just get knitting needles I guess you can get them at Walmart. Never mind. You can get supplies at lots of places. But this, I use duct tape, toilet paper tube, popsicle sticks. And with this kind of corker, you really just produce one thing, which is a long tube. So you can't really fail at it unless you go in with an expectation. But you don't know what you're making until you get there. Maybe it turns out to be a bracelet. Maybe you just make a little log that you can then conclude as a snail or a worm. So I'm always a big fan of trying not to go into it with what you want to make and seeing what comes out. I'd also like to throw to Rachel, because I know you're saying that you like it when it's very precise, the geometric work. What do you do when you make a mistake or you have to undo something? How do you cope with that?
Oh, my mom hates it. I pull out the entire thing until I get to the mistake and I fix it. I am incapable of keeping mistakes in my in my work. And often I'll be doing more taking apart than putting together. And everybody around me is pulling their hair out, going, "What are you doing?" And I'm just like, "It's a mistake. I gotta fix it." But that's, I think, related around because I have OCD and my autism. It makes it harder to ignore mistakes. But this doesn't mean that everybody has the same experience as me.
For sure. I was also going to say a nice thing about knitting is that you can rip it out and undo it until you get to that mistake and fix it. Because I know I like yarn crafts. I thought like, oh, gee, I wonder if that translates to drawing or to painting. Once you put that paint on the paper, it's on there. But I think what you also enjoy with yarn is that if you make a mistake, for sure, you do have to go back to the mistake to rip it out and then build it back up again. But you can just unwind until you get to the spot with the mistake, fix it, and then keep going.
I might jump in there because I'm a recovering perfectionist. And sometimes I have made a conscious choice to leave a mistake in and to tell myself, you know what, that's pretty little. And actually, no one's going to notice that but me. Although, Rachel, I still struggle with the the fact that I can still see it. But sometimes I've thought to myself, like, actually, the mistakes are how we know this is handmade and this is not made by a machine. So sometimes I've started calling them artisanal charm instead of mistakes.
I call them design features instead of mistakes. But I hear that it can be frustrating. I think I saw a question about people getting frustrated when they're first learning, and I can definitely relate to this. I ended up putting my knitting away for a couple of months because of the frustration of constantly making mistakes, pulling it out and not having a final product. So those of you who are frustrated starting a new craft, I hear you. I see you. But also I found that putting it away and coming back with a couple of new techniques was very helpful, and being okay with those mistakes and just keep going and setting your expectations low helped get me over the hump of creating my first product. And then afterwards, I was able to move on. My first piece was a little coaster, and that was completely okay.
We also have some people in the chat talking about, it seems like the frustration that people feel when when something's not going the way that you're envisioning it, or, when you're learning a new skill. It seems like that's resonating with people a little bit. Does anyone want to talk more? I know I touched a little bit on the frustration and my technique of, just seeing what happens and not going into it with an expectation. But does anyone else want to touch on that?
I think in particular in the beginning, when you're learning how to do it, going in with an expectation that it's going to be a process of figuring it out, and, just expecting that you're just maybe going to make, say, like a tube of finger knitting or corking, or you're just going to make a coaster, like basically a strip of knitting, and that might be full of mistakes. But that's your process of figuring it out. So I think the expectations of going in are really important, that you're not going to produce a sweater right away. A coaster is a great place to start. Or some people fold them over and sew them up, and that's what we use to make the cell phone case that you saw, or cozy, in the picture. And even with that, I think acknowledging that everyone's expectations are different. So in that case, one of the things I learned was that that particular participant got to a point, and, they sort of said, like, you know what, I'm done. I'm happy with this. And I was like, it's a little short. And then I thought, no, Melanie, this is this person's creation, and they are proud of it. And kind of that point of getting to a finished product that you're proud of, it's so great. And I think for me, that's what makes some of the more frustrating times really worth it. And there's this sentence that I love to say to people, like, thank you, I made it. When I get a compliment about something. So for me, part of the frustration is kind of thinking about the end goal, but then also making sure that, particularly for beginners, you're setting a pretty reasonable goal for what you want to make.
I can jump in here with another tip. I know something that helped me in between my period of frustration to being able to actually be able to pick it up and enjoy my knitting was learning that there's no one right technique. And I think what I started off with was trying this one very specific technique that just wasn't working for my hands and the way my hands move, and putting it away and finding people that also knit within my community and learning that there are so many different methods. For example, some people wrap the yarn around their neck. I didn't even know that was a thing. Some people wrap the yarn around their arm, and then everyone uses different movements. So knowing that there's not one way to do it and just trying on a few different ways can really, you can figure out and see what speaks to you. And that's a part of the journey.
I was going to say, speaking of what speaks to you, I would also like to bring up how we all do, or how we've all found kind of different crafts. Like Rachel, you do your knitting and also your beadwork. And like I've dabbled in, or I knit and I cork, but I've also started dabbling in crochet a little bit. The Ontario Science Centre is going to be hosting an exhibition called Crochet Coral Reef. So I made this little guy for it. It's the first crochet thing I've made, but I think it's also very useful to try to work around and find until you find a skill that really speaks to you and one that you want to continue working on. Because sometimes the motions just don't feel natural at all. Like crocheting, you only use one hook versus knitting is a two-hand ordeal. So it's good to explore. And Rachel, were you going to say something? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I thought... but I thought that maybe you were going to say something.
Me?
Oh yeah, no, maybe, sorry. I'm trying not to dominate the conversation. But does anyone else I know? I can't remember who, but I know someone else here crochets. Oh wait, it is you. Okay, yeah. Then do you want to talk about, I know you do crocheting, beading, and knitting. How do you differentiate, or do you feel like any one of those is maybe your favorite, or like pros and cons, or just benefits of having three things?
I tend to knit and crochet in the winter more and bead more in the summer. And actually I have one blanket that is knit and crochet at the same time.
Oh.
I knit this way, and then I started crocheting that way. So actually I have it here. This is the knit pattern here. So it's a cable pattern. And then on the side here, I have crochet.
Oh, wow.
So I'm building up the sides with crochet, and then the length is the knit. So sometimes I don't distinguish. I just use whatever technique would fit the situation, and I just go with my pattern, my designs.
No, that's beautiful. It's a smart idea. I think we have time for just one more question from the audience. I think, Melanie, you want to say something, so I'll let you go, and people from the audience put in any last questions, and we'll pick one last one to answer.
I selfishly want to ask a question to Rachel, which is how she got into designing her knitwork and crochet.
I'm not sure. I just
Comes natural.
It just comes naturally for me, like to take something I use something that I've seen a pattern for, and then I accommodate it. Like sometimes I'll mix cable and lace together to make, like I'll take a cable pattern and a lace pattern, I'll put them together, make a cable and lace pattern. Or I take what I've done and then I elaborate on it. And a lot of it just comes naturally for me for some reason.
I think, Rachel, people definitely want to hear from you. I think our last question will be this one. We have a question for you. It's someone asking, they're wondering if you find a difference in the effect of your knitting, crocheting, beading, and other crafts. Like I know you said that you like it, it helps you feel calm. There's the nice order and structure. Do the different crafts have different effects? Is there any of them that make you feel differently or better or worse?
No, I think they all pretty much are the same in helping me with my stress. And there's some practicalities, like if I'm going in a car, I don't want to do beadwork because I'll drop the beads and they'll go all over the place, but I want to knit instead. There's some logistics, but they all seem to have the same effect on me. Especially when I make my patterns, it's very similar to how I draw them out. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. And people here are very complimentary, very interested in your work. I know that we will be giving links to your Etsy store, I believe.
An email. I don't have anything set up yet with Etsy or anything. I plan on doing that in the future, but I need some help with that.
Oh yeah, it's such a big process. But anyway, I'm sure you can read all the things in the chat yourself. But everyone recognizes your beautiful, beautiful work.
Thank you.
And before I close off, there's just one last question. What is the best way to connect with people in this group? Such as, I think, your research, Melanie. I think we've put in some links to the hospital, but is there a specific way to contact you?
I think maybe I can put my Twitter handle into the Q&A, and people can reach out to me on Twitter. And I will say, hopefully once COVID is done, we will be looking at doing some more evaluation of our Neuronics program, hopefully a bigger one, and then hopefully offering it as well. So stay tuned for that.
Well, that is just wonderful. And unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. But don't worry, because we do sensory-friendly Saturday programming every month. It's on the first Saturday of every month. And you can subscribe to our newsletter to get the details of all of our events, or you can check out the Ontario Science Centre website for more information about sensory-friendly Saturdays. We also record our past sessions, so if you'd like to see more, you can see them there. And we'll also be sending around a quick survey after this session. Please fill it out if you can. Your feedback really helps us. Our next session will be on May the 1st. Thank you so much. I hope to see you there.